Right. So yeah. So I guess to summarize, um, in this, have more free reign from Jermaine, and the stage which I feel I got it to is one where I then send over a ref mix and we discuss ideas. Maybe the editing gets sometimes you get too far. Obviously, the idea is to retain the groove of the band and kind of get it maybe a bit tighter without losing the feel. So that'd be something we discuss, uh, over the phone or over email, or um, I basically chuck a lot of ideas in, and then some would stick, and some maybe would take out, or some kind of start us on a trail to develop that idea. And it's sort of a conversation really at that point. But I wanted to just chuck a few ideas in and see which ones you liked. So let's carry on with these ideas, shall we? So I think that was it for the side chaining and the filtering. So that guitar we looked at, which is keying that main pad, listening to some of the references like Earth, Wind and Fire in that era, the guitar sounds are usually quite wooden. So for that, I just kind of put a load of 800 1K in, which hopefully kind of retained a bit of that feel and that era from that decade. So you can feel that's a bit chunky now, and it's got a bit of compression and distortion on as well. So that's brought it to a bit more of the front of the mix. So gone over the editing and a few of the sounds here of the elements in the mix. So let's have a look at a section of as a whole. So in the pre-chorus, we've got kind of a bit of a drop down here. So the pad is filtering down, the drums are kind of down to the overheads and the kick drum. And I've also added a few sort of longer delays to some of the instruments compared to the verse. So let's listen going from the verse into the chorus.
But you can't settle down, baby, that I can handle. And I wish I should felt the same way. And I wish I should felt the same way. And I wish I should felt the same as I do. I do. But I gotta confess to you that, babe, I'm just a light fool.
So there, what I'm basically doing is there's a lot of volume automation, and there's the filtering as well, but also there's just more longer effects in the pre-chorus to sort of make it a bit more spacey, I suppose, so that when you go back to the chorus, everything can tighten up, and I've gone back to like a more of a slap on the vocal there. So that's just really sort of marks that transition a bit. Sort of a similar idea taken a bit further in this bridge section. So again, I've, if we have a look at the mix bus here. So what I've got is another filter that's sort of filtering down the entire track as it goes throughout that middle eight. And then also I've got a reverb, which, if we look at that, sort of spikes up right at the end there, so that the entire track gets quite washy, and then it's sort of pulled out and sucked away, so you're back into quite a tight, dry chorus at the end there. So let's listen to that as a whole.
The same way, and I wish I should felt the same.
So you can hear here, there, you've got the sort of dynamic change of the frequency being sucked down, and then you've got a change in depth as well just before the chorus. And there's no doubt some sort of volume dips I've done to kind of suck out some of the power, so that when you've got something to come back in with, basically. And for me, that kind of prevented that linear feel that Jermaine was a bit concerned about at the start. So yeah, more just playing with dynamics. So there's a few other things going on apart from volume. Let's have a look at the solo. So there's no vocals in the solo. So what I thought is there's a bit more space. So I could go, and I did some sort of feedback effects on this delay unit here. And I tried to do it sort of around the other parts. So if we just have a listen to, let's make sure it's on that. Just have a listen to the monitor mix there at this stage. We can hear how the solo was before. So yeah, I thought there was a bit of room for a bit of maybe a tad of wildness there. So if we just flip back to where we're at. That sort of pans around at the end there into that middle eight, which is nice. So yeah, for me that was added a bit of excitement to the solo section, I think. So a lot of the files that Jermaine sent me already had effects on, which is in a nod to the direction that he wanted the sound of the track to go and the work he put in producing it. So whilst you're in the solo, if you just listen to that guitar that comes in here. So it's already got the chorus on, which is a strong nod to the era that Jermaine referenced. So kind of feel like my job was just to take that and enhance it. So I just kind of put, I think, more chorus or flanger on it. And then also she used like a preamp to distort the guitar to bring out a few of the harmonics, and also that created a bit of a spike there, which was maybe a bit harsh when listening at louder volume. So I've just cut that out. So let's check out where it ended up. So it's a bit crispier, and then in the middle eight, let's see. Oh, you just get a load of reverb banged in there. He says. So the send goes up in the middle eight, which goes to this short lexicon here. So that adds again another bit of dimension in the middle eight there in the bridge. So essentially there, what I'm doing is just, taking what Jermaine's given me and, the sort of the ideas that he's had, and just sort of taking it a little bit further. And then, so that's sort of hopefully made the solo section a bit more exciting. So I was kind of happy with the increased dynamic, and we sort of retained kind of stylistically what the producer had set out to do. We've got a bit more of like a solid bottom end as well, a bit more groove. We've retained the groove, so that's cool. I guess all the while I'll be checking, not hitting the mix butts too hard, and the sort of overall frequency, like whether it's too bright or the whole mix is too bassy. I'm checking that with like, the reference tracks that Jermaine mentioned as well. So on the way, I'm trying to keep an eye on obviously the little details, but obviously on the bigger picture. And as I'm going, that's why the reference mix is so handy, because I can flick back and forth and just check, like, cool, well, he's got this guitar maybe this much above the other guitar. He's probably, I'll probably stick to something like that in terms of balance. And then, yeah, as a first mix, it's probably a sensible thing to do. And then obviously some of the other ideas like the filtering and the reverb, that's more sort of out there that we can discuss after he's heard the first mix. So, are there any questions regarding that middle eight section or the other bits and bobs there?
We have a question from Yves Coudron. Could you tell us something more about the trigger plugins you see that you're using to layer sounds?
Yeah.
Can you show us how you go about it?
Yes, I don't have them on this rig, but there's a few different manufacturers. I think Slate does one. Oh, there you go, Trigger 2. I think I haven't used this, but this does the same vibe. So essentially, you'd put this plugin on the channel of the acoustic microphone, such as the kick or the snare. And then when the snare goes above a certain volume, a sensitivity, oh, here you go, here's the sensitivity knob. So when you set that in a way that it triggers, it fires this sample, which you can then put, presumably, samples down here. So you might have like, a clicky kick drum, or like a big roomy kick drum, or like, a really meaty snare that you want to just sort of blend in with the live snare mic to sort of help you out a little bit in the mix, or maybe, again, just in the chorus that creeps in. So that's one program that does that. And as I said before, that's more of a mixy way of doing it. Excuse me. I used it more just like as a quick way of pasting samples on every snare. So it's just like saving time for me, really. But the other way I mentioned you could use it is turning your drummer into a drum machine, which is, a fun thing to do. So yeah, you could put like Lin drum samples underneath, or 808s or whatever, really, and just get the benefit of having that human feel, but with the sounds of, a drum machine that you wanted.
And following up to that, we have another question. We see that you use a lot of like plugins like FabFilter, Universal Audio. Is that a song-related choice, is the question, or is that what you use in general? Do you have any specific choices?
Yeah, good question. So especially, one of the things to keep it in a certain era would be the effects, because I've listened through to the references and I've noted that a certain type of reverb was maybe predominant in that era of the 80s. It's like quite specific. It was, trendy at the time to do that. So it makes sense to kind of use those same reverbs. So you've got the nod, you've got the reference. People are like, even subconsciously, like, oh yeah, it sounds like Prince because it's got like whatever, a Lin drum and a non-Lin reverb on it. So you're like, cool, right, that's what he did. So that's the kind of use of those plugins. Like, where is it? The little lexicon, for example, that would have been it. Or maybe if you want something a bit more earthy, you've got like a plate reverb. And then, everyone loved like flanger back then as well. So I've got a flanger unit. So, and again, it's because I've listened to the tracks that Jermaine sent, like that guitar there in the solo, and it's sort of nodded towards that. So what I'm trying to do is just go a bit further, and it just means putting more flanger on it, essentially. So that also, I guess, can be carried across into the sort of compressors and EQs I've used. So I guess maybe you could argue less so, but so, you could find what era the Pultec was made, or maybe you're using an SSL, or maybe you're using a cleaner EQ, and then that would maybe sort of define the era a bit as well. Obviously, slightly harder to hear, but, I guess it all adds up. And then the fab filters are just, I use them because they're just quite surgical, and you can just remove stuff you don't want, and then add color with maybe something that does have that nod towards an era or a production that you're going for. Yeah. So yeah, I hope that answers the question. Okay, cool. So we've got the dynamics in the middle 8. So let's just have a look at the vocals now. As I said, I'd be using the reference mix to make sure I was sort of sticking sort of on track, bearing in mind what Jermaine had sort of said. I've sort of muted some synthesizers in different sections again, just to get a bit more dynamic. I sort of felt like once the Prophet pad had been filtered down, that it sounded quite a lot like this more filtered OBX pad. So by muting it, not only did I make a bit more space in the mix, also, again, you've created more dynamic when more stuff slams in the chorus. So that same logic was applied to these backing vocal harmonies here. So you can see you've got the high doubles here, or harmonies, that were in the entire verse, but I've muted them in the first half so that, again, you've got to step up in as the track goes on. So let's just have a listen to those now.
I should have known straight from the start that you're just out to break some heart. Tear them to itty bitty parts, straight to the trash and get them taught. I know it's wrong, but I think I'm in love. The things that you tell me just leave me not that far. It's just that you're so beautiful, but you can't settle down, baby, that I can handle. Then I wish
So you can see you've got a step when the backing vocals come in then, and then as we looked at earlier, when the pre-chorus comes in, it goes from sort of more tight sound to more of like a spacey sound where the delays increase. So that, again, just a bit more contrast. And then when we come out of the chorus, we can go back into this second verse here.
ain't it on a full moon? I'm not the type that fools around, but it's way too easy to get lost. My friends tell me I should stop. Get on this ride just to get off. I know it's wrong, but I think
So again, I've done the same thing with the BVs there, but I've also, in the second half, increased the send to one of the effects. And also I've done sort of, because of the space between the vocals there, I thought there was room for a bit of a delay. So what I've done is sort of ridden the effects of the send to 107, which is this delay unit here. So we can see that throughout the second verse, at the end of the lines, you get a bit more of a delay between the vocals. So that sort of sounds like this.
get on this ride just to get off. I know it's wrong, but I think I'm in love. Things that you tell me to leave me neglect from. It's just that you're so beautiful, but you can't settle down, baby, that I can't handle.
So that's sort of, as well as having something, it's a bit of ear candy in between the lines. It also, the last one sort of tails over and joins the sections together quite nicely, I thought. So again, with the vocals, it's sort of carrying on with the same theme. There's different, they sort of use different effects to change the depth and the width in each section. So you've got this tight slap delay in the verses, and then the second verse has a bit of a dub thing going on. And then the chorus, the verse harmony parts, as well as the slight change to the arrangement, I've got a sort of more of a chorus modulated effects in a nod to like the 80s thing. And then when we look to the pre-chorus, it goes washy, you got the big long delays, which really sort of opens it up, and then it slams shut again for the chorus when all the other instruments kick back in as well there. So for me, it's just using sort of volume and space and the effects to really change the color of each of the sections and create dynamic there. So let's just have a look what's going on in the bridge here. Yeah, there we go. There's the sort of change in contrast between the two sections. Hopefully means that the chorus really kicks in at the end there if we just listen to the previous mix. So we'll just go up to our monitor mixes and unmute those quickly. Cool. So let's just hear that transition on the monitor mix there.
But I gotta confess to you that babe, I'm just a love fool.
And then where we're at.
The same as I do. But I gotta confess to you that babe, I'm just a love fool.
So, you know, you can hear the guitars and that cool clav thing jump up, and hopefully it's a bit more explosive when it comes in there. Cool. So I know we kind of went over this with the question that came in on the socials there, but so a lot of things I've done would be maybe wouldn't do in every mix, but it's because of the conversation, you know, I'd had with the producer before. It meant I had a bit more freedom to explore, and I put a lot of ideas, and because a lot of the time mixing for me, and I imagine a lot of people, is unattended because of people's schedules or the physical, you know, we don't live in the same country. So it was kind of logical to put all the ideas in and then send a mix over and go through them. Obviously, if sometimes people will attend for the entire mix, and it would have been, you know, present an idea, discuss it, yes or no. It would have been, you know, you kind of go through the ideas as they're created. But in this instance, it was all in. So I sort of got it to a level where I was kind of happy with. So at that stage, what I'll do is go back to my print tracks, and I'll just, everything's bussed through to the mix bus there, and I'll just print a reference. I'll print one not limited, and then one, at this point, I'll probably monitor the limited file, because it needs to match up with everything in someone's, you know, iTunes playlist, or it needs to be at a similar level. And that level, it probably makes sense to, you know, match it to the genre. You don't want to be smashing jazz records if you're mixing that sort of stuff. So, you know, obviously keep it sensible, but it needs to stand up with everything else, I guess. So then I'd send it to Jermaine, and we'd probably go back and forth on email and discuss the ideas and see which ones he liked. And then sort of maybe the whole middle eight thing was too filtered, and we'd have to try another approach for that. And we'd use, you know, a delay instead of the big reverb that sat back in, and sort of go back and forth and hone it. Maybe the balance of the chorus with those, maybe instead of having the clav, there's something else we could try really loud. Maybe it's that the profit pad is really loud or something. So we can try different balances and see, and sort of whittle it down until we get to a point where hopefully you've achieved
there is a question.
the vision of the producer.
There's a question like, this song was delivered quite neatly, as you said.
Yeah.
With respect to Jermaine.
Incredibly neatly.
What was the worst project? Well, you shouldn't say names. What was the worst project you received, and how did you deal with that? So how do you deal with that when it's not so neatly?
Well, you know, I'm incredibly lucky to work with lots of great producers, and you know, the standard of the engineering is so high that a lot of the time it comes in incredibly tidy and all sorted. But sometimes, at the other end, wherever it might be, they might be up against it. They might be told we need another song by the end of the week, and they just like physically don't have the manpower to get everything to a level that they would have liked to. So, oh, thank you. So, yes, if it's it's not very difficult to go through and tidy. It's just maybe time consuming. So, but it does, like, the editing, like I was saying earlier, in terms of the difference it has when you try and fit the elements of the mix together. If everything's sort of in a groove or in like a timing that's just working, it just makes it a lot easier to slot together. So although the sort of preparation process isn't maybe as glamorous as the mixing one, it's really important. But on a whole, everything comes in fairly tidy. It's more like the color coding and the arranging of the channels and putting the sends on the channels. That for me, it just makes everything just have a familiarity. I know where everything is. I don't need to think. I can just there's less of a barrier between that stuff and the creative part of the mix.
The preparation and stuff, is that something you do yourself, or you also have an assistant?
I have people that would help on that sort of thing, or I get involved and do that as well. And it really depends on how busy it is and like the size of the project and how many channels are in the project and stuff like that. So yeah, a lot of the time I can outsource that sort of thing, like if there's any vocal tuning to do, or if I've got a specific idea that's maybe going to take me a while to get done, I can outsource it and then I can focus on mixing. But a lot of the time, it's good to do because I've got the idea. I know how far to take it. It's just easier.
You're dialing quite deep into this mix.
Right.
If you're working with Adele or U2, do they want you to dial as deep as this or deeper? Or?
Well, I guess following on from the conversation with Jermaine, it kind of entirely varies on the project, really. Like this is, you're right. This I guess this, especially that mid late and bits like that kind of goes sort of stepping on production, that sort of area. But so no, sometimes people come to you with their monitor mix and they say, look, we really like this. What we really want is just an enhanced version of this, if that's cool. And so then, no, you wouldn't go as far with sort of the reverbs and the spins and stuff like that. And obviously there's varying degrees of editing. Sometimes it's been, someone's had the time to go through and edit it perfectly. Sometimes they haven't, and they say, look, can you just have a look at the timing in the bridge or whatever? So it really does vary.
And do you sometimes dive deeper into the mix? So, for instance, like saying melodizing maybe another chord into it, or is that really out of?
So yeah, I guess that would be it. Would, if I was to do things like that, and some of the things I've done today are because of conversations I've had with the producer. I wouldn't just go and start doing that, I don't think. Yeah. Cool. So yeah, I guess we've sent Jermaine the mix. We've gone back and forth, sort of discussed the ideas he likes, the ideas he doesn't like, and we sort of got to a point where everyone's happy. So at that point, you're sort of preparing the masters that you'd send to mastering, and these would be the file that's not limited, because essentially that's what a mastering engineer is doing. So I do, because people have been listening to the limited reference file back and forth, like they've got used to that sound. So I think it's sometimes helpful to send the mastering engineer that as well, so that they know where you're at. They know what everyone's used to hearing, but they wouldn't master that file. They'd go for the unlimited file. So I would send them the mix, and then a instrumental as well, so that if it was used, in syncs or abbots or whatever, that's possible. And then uh, sometimes I do a vocal up as well. So if obviously the vocal is really important, it's the most important thing in the mix. So sometimes it can get squashed a bit down in mastering, or sometimes people at the last minute might want the option to have it a bit louder. So it's sometimes worth doing a vocal up, because then, if needs be, they have that to master as well. And that is sort of the end of the process. You're all done. I'd sort of, in the new Pro Tools, you can sort of commit stuff quite easily. So I'd probably do that, so that you kind of got a session that's archived, and when you're several versions down the line of Pro Tools, you can open it in 5 years if you need to do an edit for another advert or whatever. It's possible just to open it. Another thing that is often required is stems. So essentially, they are the elements of the mix. So you do drums, maybe bass. You probably do each instrument individually, or stack. If there was a few things that kind of work together as one sound, you'd stack them up. So if there was like a stack of BVs, that would be just one stem, the BV stem. And the idea being that when you put these stems together, that equals the mix. So few different reasons to do that. Like, one would be archiving, because you can basically then you can open it on anything. You don't need any software, no plugins. It's that they're all printed. So in theory, if you put all the faders at 0, it recreates the mix. So that's good for archiving. Also, if you're in a larger studio like this one, you're using the console, but you're working with someone who's not in the room, you could print stems at the end of the day. And what that would mean is that if you're not able to get into that studio, or if you were in a smaller studio or a studio without the same desk and outboard, you could still open your mix and turn the vocal up a little bit in the chorus, or do whatever tweaks that you wanted, a month down the line. So that's really handy. And also, you kind of, for remixers, like, often people will get their work remixed. So the remixer will ask for the stem so that they can change the arrangement and do their own production with it. So yeah, that's the kind of reason behind stems, and it's the same process in the box as on the console. You just mute everything except the thing, like, say if you're doing a drum stem, you just mute everything except the drums, and you'd record the drums into the top track. And if you're on a console, you'd mute everything except the drums and just record it in. And then you do the same with the bass, the guitars, or blah, blah, blah. So you just go through all the channels, and that would probably be it. That's all you sort of required to do, I guess. So I guess just need to ask Jermaine if he's got any thoughts about everything that we did. If you're all happy, grab that mic.
I do have actually one question though. Just
Oh, I've got more questions.
All
All right.
Sorry.
Oh,
And
fire.
then you on. So I have a question, like, also, like, when you or yourself decide when the mix is ready, and send it sort of as like, okay, this is the vibe.
Yeah.
Producer.
$1 million question, isn't it? Well, yeah. So for me, I will often maybe print, if I've got the time, I'd do an overnight, and I'd listen to it on my way home and on the way in the morning. I kind of, in my room, because I have my own space, so I kind of know the monitoring really well. So I'm fairly confident in the sort of frequency content. So, I know that that's the amount of bass I'm hearing is the amount of bass I had. If you're traveling around, maybe you don't know the studio so well, maybe you'd take it out in the car, or like listen in various rooms. But because I'm in the space, I'm fairly confident in that aspect of it. So for me, if that's cool, and it just feels, when it feels exciting, I guess, when I can listen down to it, and after however many hours of listening to it, you're still sort of bobbing your head and feeling it, and you feel like you've achieved everything the producer or the artist sort of set out to do, then that's when I I'd send the mix over, and from there, especially in more this sort of thing where I've chucked a few ideas in, then it would begin the conversation back and forth. So that's by no means the end, you know. That's just a point where I'm saying, here's some ideas. I'm happy with this. Let me know which bits you're into or not.
Jermaine, anything to add from your side? I mean, I also understood like you made it or recorded it in Logic, and then you had to transform it to Pro Tools. Also, was that how was that process? And if you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I do most of my production in Logic, and I already told Matt it was less tidy in the Logic project because you're just laying down ideas and stuff. Uh, so actually, when migrating and exporting the stuff and you're happy with the sound, uh, then uh, the case of tidying it up uh, gives it some sense of letting go, I guess, because you can tweak endlessly if you're in the production process. Um, I really like what he's done to the track in terms of dynamic and depth and just adding to the sound and also studying the specific era which we referred to in our conversation. So uh, yeah, it's good to know that someone bears in mind what you have in your head and explores that more deeply and adds up to the sound you want to hear. So uh, that's a big plus for me. Yeah. Thank you, man.
Thank you. Thank you. Cool.
Well, I think that's a wrap for today. Um, well, thank you, Matt, for your in-depth explanation, and it was really inspiring. Thank you also, Jermaine, for and your band, of course. What was Lunar Energy for sharing your track with us, and Matt. Thank you to Universal Audio for well, making this all happen, and our host, of course, Abbey Road Institute in Amsterdam. We hope that you enjoyed it. And thank you also for all the questions. And please do follow us on SeriousSoundSessions.com for additional backstage information and some additional video content. And of course, for the next episode of Serious Sound Sessions. Thank you very much.